This is a friend's knife. It's a Chris Reeve knife, and I want to make a sheath for it, but I think I'm going to make several sheaths and let him choose which one he likes, because I have several different ideas. Fairly simple, but I think I'm going to make a mold for forming the leather, and I'm going to use some paint sticks. These paint sticks are just about the same thickness as the knife and just about the same width, so I'm just going to go ahead and glue these together. Maybe make it a little bit wider for this blade, I'm not sure. I think it'll work the way it is. Anyway, so I'll go glue it together and come back and figure out what I'm going to do next. I glued some paint sticks together and I made the center section extra wide so I can kind of mimic the blade sticking out here. So I'm going to go ahead and just put it down here and try to trace out the knife and then cut it to match. I'll go out to my little shop and cut that out and come back. I went ahead and cut this out in the shop. I just used a hacksaw and a file, but I want to round the edges to mimic the knife again. So if you look at this closely, this kind of mimics the blade that sticks out a little bit here. It's pretty close to the right shape, but I want to show or go ahead and bevel the edges like the knife so it pretty much mimics it. So this will be a little different in here. I don't know how I'm going to do that. But it's kind of beveled on all the edges and a little more it looks like on the ends. So I'll just round those over with a file. It almost looks like it's curved, but it's not. Just a kind of an optical illusion. It's straight. Okay, I'll go file off the edges to give it the beveled look like the knife, so I can use this as a form rather than the knife. I went ahead and rounded the edges out in the shop so that this now looks pretty much like the knife. Put it over the top, it's the same shape and size. Now I could still use the knife, just wrap it in saran wrap. I'll do the same with this, but since I'm going to be making several, I don't want to be pushing this in and out and ruining the finish on this or marring the finish in any way, because this is a pretty expensive knife. Anyway, that should do. I have several different designs in mind. One that this clip will actually go over the leather, one that'll have a notch in it. So I have several other ideas in mind. I'll probably make another piece of wood on top to make this clip on the one that goes inside the leather sheath. But that'll come later. I'll make the one that goes, the clip goes over the leather first. Here's the wooden template I'm going to use instead of the knife. I've marked out where the clip is, and this will have to be the top side that you pull out. So I've marked top with an arrow there. And then I took my favorite template material, cereal boxes, and I just made a piece that's big enough to enclose the whole knife, because I'm going to wet it down and try to stretch it around this. And then I got a piece of leather, so I'm just going to cut out a piece of leather out of this. I don't really care about the edges so much, because it's going to be nailed down and cut off later. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out this piece of leather. Got my staple gun to nail it down. Next thing I'm going to do is get this wet so I can stretch it over the wood. I'll get this extra light on here. I think that looks better. I'll do it without that extra light. It causes too much glare. I've got the piece of leather wet, and now I'm going to go ahead and put this knife blank in there, and I want to stretch it at this bottom end so it kind of conforms to the shape of the into the knife. Before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and put some saran wrap on this to make it more waterproof so that the wood doesn't swell up or come unglued. Okay, I went ahead and put some saran wrap on here to keep the wood from getting wet. So I'll continue. You can see it's already starting to conform to the shape. As you can probably see, I'm keeping the staples back away from this edge so that when I cut it off here I can stitch and the staple holes won't show later on. Now this is going to get cut off at the top here, so the knife will actually stick out a little bit, and that lanyard you can pull it out with, and the clip will go over the top on this particular design. Okay, I'll keep working at that and let it slowly dry. And I'll probably end up having to pull it out because the knife blade is a little wider back out here where the blade sticks out, and I want to make sure that it can slide in and out and won't be too tight up here where it's actually narrower. This has had plenty of time to dry, so I'm going to take it off the board here and trim it to size. First thing I'm going to do is take a pair of dividers and mark off a line around here that I'm going to trim off this excess leather. I'm going to go ahead and mark off a line here and just kind of mark this where I'm going to trim it. This will give me a rough guide where to cut. Okay, let me get on my cutting board and we'll slice that off. Okay, I'm going to slice along that line I just marked, and I'll go through both pieces of leather here at one shot. Of course, I'll probably have to make several passes to get it. And I'm going to trim off this bottom a little bit so that this kind of blends in here. Stitching will kind of come in closer at this bottom edge. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go ahead and mold a belt buckle, since this is about the right width now. I didn't want to do it before I actually had to cut the size to know how big to make that belt loop. It's not going to be quite as wide as some of the other ones I've made before. I looked at this and thought, hey, this ruler is about the right width for a belt loop on this, so I cut a strip of leather that wide and also made a little template that is going to be like the belt loop out of a piece of cardboard. So it'll fit on there, something like that. So I'm going to make several of these sheaths, so I've got enough here to make at least a couple of them. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off, and I'm going to cut it a little bit long so that when I fold it over I'll have plenty there. And we'll make a couple of these. I'm going to go ahead and mark the round in and go ahead and cut the round in on the belt loops also. In the past I've made these just a diagonal cut at the bottom, but I want to make this one a little bit different with this rounded end and see how that looks. There's two. I'm going to get these wet and mold them around this piece of aluminum that's about the same width as a belt. It'll, mold around like this piece of cardboard. Okay, I've got these two pieces of leather that are going to be belt loops wet, and let's mark about where the fold's going to be. About there. Just fold that around. I want to mold this down a little bit so it's going to kind of form into the shape at the bottom of the belt loop where it hooks on. And I'll let this dry and reform a little bit at a time as it's drying. Let's do this one the same way. Since I'm going to make about 3 of these sheaths, or maybe even 4, I don't know. I may make a couple more of these off camera. This is the knife form. I'm going to go ahead and cut this closer to its final length, which is about this line I've drawn here. I just wanted to double check there. I'm going to go ahead and cut off this extra leather. This is just a rough cut now, it's not anything finished. So the knife will end up fitting in here like this. And I'll still have to cut it down more, and I'm going to have to cut a little notch in here. This is the knife where this clip will go over the leather, so the notch will come down underneath where it loops in here, and this clip will go over the leather. At least on this particular design it will. I decided to put this in here and cut this down a little closer to its final dimension on the top part. And I'm going to cut it down to about where this angle is here, maybe from here to here. So I'm just going to mark it and cut across. Yeah, that's about the way I want it. The next thing I'm going to have to do is cut that notch in that I was talking about. And it will be about here. So I'm just going to eyeball it here. And it's going to go down to about here. So I'm going to cut out a little slot in here. That's close. You can see what that looks like there. That little mark right there. I think I'm going to cut that with an X-Acto knife.